On page 4, that huge paragraph on page 4 that starts right up near the top, constantly the people put forth immense strength only to end in immense weakness. What Pike is saying in this paragraph is that people will retain their superstitions, their biases, their ignorance, even if in the past despotisms and tyrannies have become popular and the people support those. They will be held down with false beliefs. If they have no freedom of love and wisdom, truth and justice to guide them, they will be in a vaporous miasma of misery. That's essentially what he's saying. He's trying to use as many poetic metaphors and historical things. He's going all out, and then he says, in the past, after the tyrants have been removed, the people should have kept those prisons up as a reminder of the horrible way of life they once had. Alcatraz should become a museum. The force of the people maintained the power that built its gloomy cells and placed the living in their granite sepulchres. In other words, he's saying, the tyrannies are so bad that you should keep the remnants of the bad to remind us to fight for the good. Fight for your freedoms. Make sure you seriously try to maintain your freedoms for all peoples. Otherwise, that granite sepulcher that they're going to throw you in for the rest of your life, that's going to be your fate. That's essentially what he's saying. The force of the people cannot, by its unrestrained and fitful action, maintain and continue in action and existence a free government once created. Once you get freedom, you must be vigilant in its favor, because the tyrannies will try to overthrow your freedoms. So if you don't maintain them, you can lose them, is essentially what he's saying. He says it must be maintained through law. He uses the Egyptians' manner of taking that huge Nile River and breaking it up into smaller and smaller, more manageable tributaries and canals in order to maximally benefit the greatest number of people through their irrigation system, so that instead of just watering 10 acres, they could water hundreds of thousands of acres. But it had to be controlled, it had to be regulated, it had to flow according to the proper rules and conduct. The intelligence had to tend it, and then the benefit became immense for the entire civilization. That's his example from Egypt, and he's applying it to us and all free peoples around the world. He is saying that if you make a breach in the freedom, then the hammer of the tyrant comes back. He will see the weakness and he'll say, aha, I can break in and I can promise them freedom, and then I can get them under my rule and subjugate them again. So if you maintain your superstitions, ignorance, you think education is expensive? Ignorance is the expensive thing, not education. Use our intellects. The force of the people, or the popular will, in action and exertion, symbolized by the gavel, regulated and guided by the acting within the limits of law and order, symbolized by the 24-inch gauge, has for its fruit the benefits of living under a lawful society and maintaining that law, keeping our rights. The benefits of this is liberty, equality, and fraternity. Liberty regulated by law, equality of rights in the eye of the law, brotherhood within its duties and obligations as well as its benefits. A peaceful working society through law is what we're after. On page 5 further, the rough ashlar and the perfect ashlar are parts of the symbolisms of the lodge. The rough ashlar is said to be a stone taken from the quarry in its rude and elementary natural state. The perfect ashlar is said to be a stone made ready by the hands of the workmen, adjusted by the working tools, so that it can be fit into the building properly. I mean, that's how the ancient stonemasons worked. Anyway, he says, they allude to the self-improvement of the individual craftsman. And he says that's one possible interpretation, although he thinks it's a superficial interpretation. It's kind of interesting. He says the ashlars equate to society as a whole. Kind of interesting how he puts this. The rough ashlar is the people as a mass, rude and unorganized. The perfect ashlar, or cubical stone, is the symbol of perfection, is the state, the rulers deriving their powers from the consent of the governed, not through their own desire done by gunpoint. No. It's a lawful process. The governed agree to let the ruler govern them as long as it is in justice, mercy, truth, and right. That's how that's set up. And then we have the perfect cube. And he shows the cube. You only see 3 sides of that cube, 9 lines and 7 points. The other sides and the bottom are invisible, even though we know they're there. The cube is a very important symbol. 3 faces, 9 external lines between the 7 points. 3, 9, and 7. The complete cube has 3 more faces, making 6, 3 more lines making 12, and 1 more point making 8. He's saying this on page 5. As the number 12 alludes to the sacred numbers 3, 5, 7, and 3 times 3 or 9, and is produced by adding the sacred number 3 to 9, while its own 2 figures, 1 and 2, the unit or the monad and duad, added together make the same sacred number 3. Numbers in antiquity were considered sacred, some numbers more sacred than others, because of their relationships to symbolisms which helped people keep liberty, the truth, light, justice, and love in their minds. The power of the symbol is not for its own sake. The power of the symbol is pointing our minds to the truth beyond the symbol of a righteous concept, something to that effect. It's very important of why they took numbers to mean something sacred, because it reminded them of the stone of truth, the perfect cube of the governed in a just society. Therefore, the numbers 3, 5, 7, and 9 were very important to them, as they should be to us. This is the idea, briefly, of the rough interplay between the symbol and the symbolized. Produced by force, acting by rule, hammered in accordance with lines measured by the gauge out of the rough ashlar, it is an appropriate symbol of the force of the people, expressed as the constitution and law of the state. That's well put. The state itself, the 3 visible faces representing the 3 departments, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative. The executive executes the laws, the legislative makes the laws, the judiciary interprets the laws, applies and enforces them between man and man, between the state and the citizens. The 3 invisible faces of the cube could represent liberty, equality, and fraternity, the threefold soul of the state, its vitality, spirit, and intellect. So the cube can represent the various interplays of the individual with the state, and all governed according to equity, justice, law. That's a pretty powerful symbol. It's a very interesting way to interpret the symbolism, isn't it? That's one possibility.